details. What is a book sprint?
The first time somebody told me about a book sprint was in 2016 when a group of young people who'd received a European funding grant said, we have to write 2 reports to complete this work, and we think that's kind of boring. So we want to do a book sprint. And I'm like, okay. And we'd like you to host it. I was like, okay. I didn't know what that was, but I looked it up online and I found out that a book sprint is like a hot housing or a pressure cooker opportunity to create together. So people will sit in a place, normally co-located, so in the same spot, from 3 to 5 days with everything they need in the space to write a book, including the design talent, the layout, the authors, the editors, everybody, and attempt to really just go so fast as to create this thing in 3 to 5 days. In reality, we didn't make the 3 days. There needed to be editing, and some people were kind of missing in action, and we needed to find them again and all that stuff. But the idea still remained with me about how potent it is to work together on something in a concentrated amount of time. So when I was asked to be part of this book sprint, I thought, wow, great. And interestingly enough, this particular space that I'm sitting in is the place I was in 2 years ago in the Netherlands to do the last book sprint. So it feels a bit like return to the scene of the crime. Okay. And in this case, the cool new wrinkle is trying to do a book sprint while with 45 different authors in many different locations. So only 2 teams that actually were co-located, some of us here in the Netherlands and some in San Francisco, and everybody else really virtually. And could we actually hold the energy and make the container for people to be really creative together across that kind of great distance and inside of cyberspace? And I found that to be a really intriguing inquiry, how to host like that.
Mm-hmm. How did you do that? How did you create and keep that container alive during those days?
Well, that's an interesting question. How do you keep a container alive over multiple spots and over multiple times? And in this case, if we looked at us here in the Netherlands as Book Sprint Central, then we had the Asia Pacific team starting first. So they actually came into the sprint before anybody else. And we devised a set of rolling check-ins and check-outs so that there was always a space people could come to, even if they were sitting at home alone with their keyboard or coming in after work working on their document, that they could actually find a place to meet us at some point in time. And we really encourage people, be part of this, collaborate by coming into the Zoom room and the virtual conference room and saying, hi, here's how I'm going. So the Asia Pacific people started first, and then as they were going out in the evening at 5 o'clock in Singapore, we would be coming on at 10 a.m. in the Netherlands after having had our own check-in. And then at the end of the day, we checked out here at about 5, and at 6 o'clock we checked in with the San Francisco team who were coming online. And it just kind of kept rolling like that. Of course, we had some crazy people like Tim and Jaron who just kind of showed up on the book sprint at odd hours in order to be present. And that's actually really beautiful. So there is both like a common fireplace to come to, I guess, but also that element of surprise of who's going to show up this time. And I think that kept everybody really intrigued and wanting to check in. And they really felt the energy from working together on this. So the other beauty was I go to sleep here, and when I wake up, there's input for me. Or I can say, my head is full, I can't write anymore, but now I want to read somebody else's contribution, both to be of service to them and to reinvigorate and be inspired myself. And we saw that happening.
Why did you say yes to the invitation to host this book sprint?
I said yes because I like the concept of book sprint. I really like the visual practitioner field, and I've come into contact with it as somebody who's kind of an edge walker between hosting and facilitation to visual practice. So I know a lot about harvesting and hosting together. I know a lot of people who are practicing like this, and I was invited to go to UViz and host that conference in 2014, which is really when I came into the field as somebody to support it and say, hey, we're over here as your key collaborators, and it would be really good if these 2 fields knew each other better. So I feel like I've been in between, and I guess that makes me a good person to host this because I feel a real affinity and love for this field, although I wouldn't classify myself as a visual practitioner. So I'm a host, and my job in this is to create the container. And if you think about, okay, what do you mean by container? So, here's a cup with water in it. A glass or a cup is a container for liquid. It's one kind of container. This is a fairly big one. And if the water, of course, was way down here, if I tripped, it might not be so quickly over the top. But of course, a teapot's a better container for transporting tea than a cup, because a teapot usually has a lid on it, and it's a more robust container. So that's the question about how do you create a container that people can be in this interesting process of creation in, because you need to feel supported when you're in creation. Because you can, to be able to take yourself to the edge, to say, I want to explore something I haven't talked about before, or even as a first-time author, I've been invited to be part of this project, but secretly I'm a bit nervous about that. How do I find some connection, some support, some sense of being in this with other people? So that's the reason you create a container and you use process to do it. And we just did really simple check-in and check-out. The wider editorial team really, I think, was incredibly responsive on, here's something that's needed, how do I do that, and immediately figuring it out and responding to it. So what I've most enjoyed personally in watching this is the creativity that's been across all of it. And in the moment, in the emergence, saying, yes, we can do that, yes, we'll figure that out, yes, this can grow, yes, this is stretching in this direction, yes, you can be part of it. So it's been a very generous and invitational field. And I think that's rubbing off on the work itself. I'm experiencing that in our check-ins, really hearing people say, I loved having the feedback I got, that really helped me, thank you so much. Or posting in our Facebook group, thank you for the feedback I got. I was feeling kind of lonely before, and I woke up and there was feedback. So maybe to speak just a moment to the technical support here. How did we make that work? So there were a number of platforms that were all working together. So we had Zoom as our main check-in platform. People could have the Zoom link. The Zoom room was open. If people needed something, they could kind of approach the microphone and go, hey! And somebody in San Francisco would be there, or someone else would respond to them. And we had regular check-in time. So Zoom was where people saw each other face-to-face. We had a Facebook group so people could go, here's how I'm feeling, or I can't make the title work, what do I do? That kind of how's it going type of platform. We had Trello as our platform for saying, how is this moving on as a project? Where is my chapter? Is it in first draft? Has it been reviewed? Is it going to the next draft? And people said, I can see how things are tracking across here. It's really great. So, and then we used Google Docs as a way for people to comment on each other's work. And that means that when you go into your document, nobody has moved all your words around, but it's easy for you to see what people are saying about your text and how they're responding to it, and then you can decide what you do. And it's really visible if somebody's been in there or not. So all of these things together, actually, from my point of view, worked quite seamlessly to support people. And then we also had the new platform from the Grove, which is called the Glen, which is a place where collaborators can meet. So that was the other platform that was in support of this. That sounds like quite a lot, but actually each one of those had a very specific purpose, and they all were fit for purpose, so it, I think, worked really well.
So in this process of the book sprint, what did you notice happened to people as this process unfolded?
What is interesting to me in any kind of process is, and maybe this is an appreciative inquiry stance, because appreciative inquiry says create the kind of process that will give you the experience of how you mean to go on and what you mean to create, right? So if the intention of this book is to expand the field, and maybe secretly also to connect the field, that already began happening in the way we were working together. So people, first of all, came in, yay, I've been invited, I feel really great, thank you, Rachel, or thank you, Jaron, or thank you, Tim, or whoever's invited me. I feel great, but everybody kind of comes in with their own thing. Then over the process of grappling with that thing, how do I write about this in a way that people can understand it and people can move this work further? Then I need somebody else's eyes to look at what I think I know really well to make sure, do I have assumptions? Do I have other things going on that make it hard for the reader? So suddenly people come into collaboration with each other. And what we heard from people more than once was, I feel like I'm finally connected to my colleagues. We had one woman who said, I know I'm a real introvert and I'm at home, I'm either in the room by myself or I'm at home, but I'm realizing now, being in this process, how much I need collegial support. So suddenly this group of 45 has become bonded over this strange and wonderful thing we did. And that makes more cohesion in the field in general, because these people are around and about the place. They have been learning from each other's work and learning about their own work. So already we have, I think, expanded and connected the field in the way we're hoping the book will do as it goes further. And I have a little piece of harvest here that I loved. When I asked people, what have you learned about the field? Somebody said, I've learned that we're full of smarts and hearts. Hearts and smarts. So I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. Hearts and smarts. So people who really care about their work, who are really passionate about their work, and also are really clever at doing it. So people feel like I'm seeing my colleagues and I'm being seen. There's something really important about that. But at the same time, someone today said, or yesterday said, I feel like people have approached this with no ego. They've approached it with generosity. And that happens when your invitation and your field is working in a good way to promote generosity, which is what I'd hope any professional field I'm part of would be like.
Now we have had this intensive book sprint. How do you see how you can keep a container around our work in the coming period? Because the book hasn't finished yet. It will be published in half a year from now. How to keep a container?
It's always an interesting question how you keep people together around a piece of work, because while we're doing something like a sprint, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of focus. People are like, yeah, I'm there for the 3 days. And then life happens. And it's interesting for a project like this that is not a sole author. It's actually a group of authors together in an editorial team. How do you stay collaborative around producing the final product, but also then telling other people about it and marketing it? So the whole team needs to be like the cheerleaders going on this. So we've been talking about how do we stay together, and I think one idea you can see on the screen here, this was our checkout call, or a check-in call really, with a new author team. So Sabine and Tomo here are going to be co-authoring a chapter on visuals around the World Cafe. And as part of this we said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we actually hosted a virtual World Cafe and invited all the authors to be part of it a little bit down the line, February, March, and then used what we hear in that World Cafe as part of this chapter. So this kind of innovative, and you'll notice I didn't have a cup, so I'm raising the tea bag. But this kind of innovative idea is one way to really put the practice into practice and have people be part of something collaboratively to keep the energy going and to reinforce the connection and the relationship between people. So those kind of ideas, and I don't know if you can see the walls behind me, but we've brainstormed a lot of other marketing ways that people can be part of it, help to promote it, help to finish it off. So it's an interesting question, I think. How can this community continue to collaborate in order to serve that initial intention of expanding and connecting the field?
Okay.
So one final metaphor maybe for this kind of work, and I've raised it because I lived in New Zealand. So this concept of the braided river, if you Google that, you'll see images of a wide plain between mountains usually, and in New Zealand this is in the South Island outside of Christchurch, so in the Canterbury Plains. You have the main body of the river flowing along through shingle, through stones like this, and then you'll have little tributaries that go off and come back in and go off and come back in, and that's really the DNA of this kind of a book. So everybody's online with the intention, that's the main flow of the river. Everybody's online with let's make sure we are deepening our practice together. Let's really reinforce this whole field. Let's help visuals and what they can do come into all stages of process in life. And then they all have their specialities they're going to go out and talk about. And then they come back into the mainstream and they go out like this. So at its best, this whole process would be like a braided river. Everybody's carrying the DNA, but everybody's carrying their own bit of wonder and magic too, and weaving it back into the whole. So it's a nice way to think about how a project like this can work.